Let's bring in Jamie Ellerton, who's here in studio with me. He's a conservative strategist. Big picture as we zoom out here and what you make of Mark Carney's economic agenda. This announcement coming up later today, plus tomorrow in all likelihood, an announcement on a pipeline. What do you make of it?
Yeah, there's a lot going on right now, and I think when you look at just the reality that the Prime Minister faces, he's essentially having to choose between bad options and how to make things less worse. And so the announcement today on steel is clearly meant to be a bridge to help get the steel industry to a better place, but ultimately Canada's going to need to find long-term customers.
It feels a bit whack-a-mole in a way, doesn't it? Because it's like steel, softwood lumber, aluminum, the car sector, and other industries that are being scrunched or squished.
Yeah, and if you think of another industry that Canadian steel could go towards, we're talking about pipelines. We understand from what the Prime Minister said in the House of Commons yesterday that it's going to create the conditions to maybe make a pipeline possible, but not necessarily have sufficient conditions to go forward on that. That, to me, sounds like months, if not years more, of regulatory holdup that Canadian steel is not going to get made to go into pipelines. And so on the one hand today, Mark Carney is having to kind of lead long-term, where he wants to take the country and get all the levers of government rowing in that direction while managing all the politics across the premiers as well as in the House of Commons. Well, today he's going to be down in Hamilton talking to steelworkers who are feeling like their jobs are in jeopardy before the holidays because of the impact of the tariffs are having on their sector.
Conservative leader Pierre Poilievre has said some of this stuff is basically nothing more than glorified photo ops by Mark Carney. And I wonder what you make of that criticism.
I think that's a big political theater, if I'm being honest, Todd. I think when you look at what's going on here, the federal government can only literally do so much, and you cannot have the federal government suddenly go buy a ton of steel that would have steel workers working, which is why you're seeing these temporary measures be put in place. But I think the other piece here that's really big, and I think it's what Pierre Poilievre is really trying to hone in on, the Liberal government under Justin Trudeau was really famous at doing big, grand announcements, and quite frankly, terrible with the follow-through. So much so that Prime Minister Carney is actually reversing a lot of Justin Trudeau positions here in his first coming up on year in office. And so when you look at kind of the politics of that, Pierre Poilievre is going to be talking to Canadians at large, but also conservatives. Conservatives have, for the past 15 years, been saying we need to build more pipelines in this country, and we haven't been able to as a result of the lack of political consensus and a lack of federal leadership to kind of really drive these issues forward. And so there's lots of politics, especially as you're coming into the holiday recess in Ottawa.
Absolutely. What about the tension between British Columbia, Alberta, Saskatchewan is also involved, the federal government, of course, involved, and whether you think Carney risks losing support in British Columbia? You know, you're pointing out the idea that conservatives, a lot of them in Alberta, have been asking for a pipeline for a long time. There are some who say, that's a no-win situation. Build a pipeline. They're not going to start supporting Mark Carney. These are conservatives. But he might lose support in British Columbia as a result of ramming through a pipeline.
I think when you look at the reality of the tough waters ahead for Canada's economy, you're already seeing a slowdown in several sectors. Mark Carney is essentially making the case that we need to do more to stimulate economic growth. And he, I think, fundamentally knows that it can't be government subsidizing the country to prosperity. Otherwise, we'd already be rich already. And so, and I think when you look at the history of pipeline politics, you have the center and the center left arguing against them in Canada for the better part of 15 years. Part of that kind of changed with the Kinder Morgan twinning project that went into BC. You saw the Liberal government realize for national unity, we actually need to twin this, so much so even though they made it uneconomical and the private sector proponent of that pipeline walked away, the federal government literally nationalized it to get it built, and that's today flowing hundreds of thousands of barrels of oil into the lower mainland for export every single day. And so I think when you look at how pipeline politics and the debate around it played out 10, 15 years ago with Northern Gateway into the twinning of Kinder Morgan to where we are today, one, I think the existential crisis that Canada faces as a result of the Americans deciding they no longer want to be reliable trading partners changes that for a lot of Canadians. And two, I think when you look at the realities of what modern engineering is capable of and all these sensors and technology that goes in place to monitor every single foot of that pipeline all along the way from where it would start in Alberta to wherever it ends up exporting in BC, industry can actually make the case of here's how our Canadian engineers are doing, here's the technology that's available, the fact that shipping containers are now like double steel hulls, and so if there is, gosh forbid, a real accident, there's technology and fail stops in place that would prevent catastrophic oil spills. And I think having the trust in the men and women who operate these industries with sound, responsible, but not overly zealous government regulation that actually will allow this to flourish. It's an opportunity for the Prime Minister to speak, especially to centrist Canadians, and say, I know what you're thinking on climate. I know what you thought about pipelines in the past. Here's the reality of the industry today, and kind of take those soft doubters, people who are skeptics, but maybe not radical opponents, and bring them onto his side to get this done. And I think the fact that proof in the pudding that I think there's real hope with this strategy is you have Alberta Premier Daniel Smith about to sign this agreement with effectively we hear the support of Saskatchewan Premier Scott Moe. And these aren't people who just go along for photo ops in Ottawa for the sake of photo ops in Ottawa.
Well said. Jamie Ellerton here in studio with me. Great to see you. Great to have you with me in
Thanks,
the studio.
John. Great to join you.